You might have every tool in this video, but are you using them correctly? I put together a list of some common tools that most people have that don't use correctly or to their fullest potential. Let's get into it. We're gonna start off with one of the most common tools in any home or workshop, and that is a drill. Most people are using their drill backwards. I know what you're thinking, how do you use a drill backwards? When I say backwards, I mean your speed setting. So there's a 1 and a 2 on this drill. Some drills have a 3rd setting, and that's your speed setting. The easy way to remember what speed setting you should be at is if you're on speed 1, that's for driving in screws. If you're on speed 2, that's for drilling, whether it's into wood, metal, or concrete. You wanna be on speed number 2 for that. Now that we've got the correct speed setting, we're gonna go to this dial up here that we call the clutch. The clutch controls the amount of torque or force that is transferred from the drill to the drill bit or from the drill to the screw itself. So on this particular clutch, we've got numbers that go from 1 all the way up to 22, and that is your different torque settings. After that 22, you can see a little drill bit. Now that's what you want to be on if you're actually drilling with a drill bit into wood or to metal or something like that. And then after the drill bit, there's a little hammer. You want to be on that hammer if you're drilling into concrete. If you're on that hammer setting, it actually kind of hammers in as it's drilling at the same time into that concrete. So the rest of these numbers are specifically for driving in screws. How do you know what torque setting you want to be at for whatever you're screwing in? Well, that's kind of determined by how far you want that screw to be driven in, and then that will kick in and stop spinning that drill. That way you don't drive too far in and ruin the piece. If you've got it set too high, you could drive all the way through your material and ruin whatever project you're working on. If you've got it set too low, it won't drive that screw into the material as far as you want. So we're gonna do a little example here. With the speed setting set to 1, we're gonna start our clutch off on number 5. That way we can work our way up to what we actually need. So we made it a little more than halfway through the screw before it stopped spinning, so we're gonna adjust it to 10 and give it a try. There's still some of that head sticking out, so we're gonna bump it up to 18. That should do it. Perfect, now we can continue with the rest of the screws that we're using in the project and keep that setting where it is. Next on the list, just about everybody knows that tape measures are for measuring, but they're packed with so many more features that most people don't know about. Starting with the outside of our tape measure, most have a number written on them. Right here, this one says 3 9/16. This is actually the distance of the back to front of the bottom of the tape measure. And what this is used for is measuring inside corners. So if you're measuring, say, wall to wall, instead of having to pull your tape measure and bend it and try to get it to fit into that space, you can just pull it straight from wall to wall, get your measurement, and then add that 3 9/16 to whatever your tape measure says. Now let's take a look at the actual numbers and symbols on the tape measure itself, because this is where the fun starts. So we all know that these long lines that go all the way through represent 1 inch, and you can see that at every inch. Then you've got your 16th, 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, and 1/2 inch marks. But once we reach that 1 foot, you're gonna see a black arrow on each foot after that. And that's gonna be all the way down your tape measure just to signify that 1 foot mark. But when we get to 16 inches right here, you can see that it is red. There's a red square around that 16 inch, and that indicates distance on center in between studs. So in the US, the standard for studs when you're building a home, so if you're framing a wall, standard distance between studs is 16 inches. So on every 16 inch mark, there's going to be a red square around that. That helps when you're laying out walls really fast. You can just mark every 16 inch because you know where they are because of that red square. Now, when we get past 16 inches, we're gonna see a black diamond right here at 19.2 inches. And that is the standard required distance between floor joists in the US. So if you're laying out a floor, 19.2 inches is where every floor joist is gonna be laid out. It also helps because most sheets of plywood are 96 inches in length. If you divide 96 by 5, you're gonna get 19.2. So that way you don't have to do any trimming. You've got your floor joist laid out and you're ready to go with your floor. Next up, we've got a carpenter's pencil. If you're thinking, well, that's just a normal pencil, you're wrong. Carpenter's pencils obviously aren't round like your everyday pencil, they're flat. And why is that? Well, if you're working on a slanted surface and you set your pencil down, you don't want it to roll away, especially if you're high up. So they're designed to not roll away when you set them down. So in addition to being flat, Carpenter's pencils are also a 1/2 inch wide by a 1/4 inch thick. And that's great to use as a reference. You can also use it if you're up against a wall and you need to scribe. You know that you've got a 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch mark right there. Now the shape of the lead comes into play too with Carpenter's pencils. It's not round like your everyday pencil. It's actually a rectangular shape, and that's so you can control the thickness of the lead. So when you're marking lines, if you need a really tight line, you can make that lead really skinny like this one, or if you need a thicker line to mark as a reference point, you can make it more flat shaped like this, and it gives you a nice thick line. Next up, we're going bigger and we're leaning more into the woodworking side of things. Most serious woodworkers or woodworking shops have a jointer in them, but they only use them for 1, maybe 2 things, and that's flattening and squaring up lumber. But these things offer so much more. Probably one of the most underutilized machines in any woodworking shop. I'm gonna show you one of my favorite things to do on the jointer, which is making rabbet cuts. This is called your rabbeting ledge. The first thing we're gonna do is bring our fence all the way up as far as we want. We're gonna go a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch, make it easy square. Now we wanna lower the rabbeting ledge. You don't really wanna take more than 1/8, it's a lot of material to remove. And that's a super easy way to make a rabbet cut. It's actually my preferred method. I could literally come up with an entire video focused on just tips and tricks that you could do on the jointer that most people don't know. If you guys want to see that, let me know in the comments. This next one is going to be fun because we get to cut some stuff. Most of our workshops are well equipped with saws at every station to cut wood. And all of these saws do a great job at cutting wood, but what if we wanted to cut material other than wood? This works for your miter saw, your table saw, and in this case, we're gonna use our circular saw. All of these saws are equipped with saw blades with sharp teeth that spin really fast like this, but those don't work if you're trying to cut plastic or metal. If you're trying to cut plastic with teeth like this, it's just gonna chip out. You're gonna have a disaster on your hands. So to cut plastic or metal with this same saw blade, I recommend using an older blade. Turn it around and flip it backwards. So now that way your teeth are spinning like this, and you're not digging in and chipping out. You're actually kind of grinding away at that material. It works great on every saw, but I do want to put a disclaimer before we get started because these saw blades are not designed to be flipped around and cut other material. So if you are doing this, do this at your own risk. I'm just simply showing you an option that I've used in the past. So to do this, we're actually gonna cut some corrugated roof. If you've ever tried to cut corrugated roof with some of these tin snips, it works great for 1 or 2 cuts, but as soon as you start getting in to a foot or so, that roof starts getting near your hand, starts catching, the cut just sucks, and you start veering off. So we're gonna use a circular saw with the blade flipped backwards. I've got a station set up out back with a piece of metal roof that we've got left over from our shop build, and we're gonna cut it with a circular saw blade. Let's go. All right, we are all set up, ready to get this cut going, but remember, safety first. We've got our gloves and our Shopshades. Huge shout out to my friend John. These things are absolutely amazing. I'll link them below if you guys want some of the best safety glasses out there. Let's do this. Definitely not the quietest option, so if you live in a neighborhood, I would highly suggest doing this during the day while everybody's at work, but it works great, gives you a super clean cut on that metal corrugated roof. If you guys enjoyed this video and these tips, be sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments which one of these you're gonna be using on your next project.